You would never think it, but this small toy gun from the 90s helped create one of the most iconic and devastating weapons in gaming history, the BFG 9000. The BFG 9000 is an iconic part of Doom's identity, as recognizable as the super shotgun or Doomguy's form-fitting forest green armor. But how exactly did a Toys R Us purchase in the early 90s lead to one of the most quintessential of all video game weapons? Well, to fully understand that story, join us as we track the evolution of the BFG from this to this. The BFG 9000 was based on photographs of the very gun you see in my hands. The Roargun, originally found in a 1990s Toys R Us, would light up, flash, and make all sorts of noise in the real world, but in the world of Doom, it became the biggest of big f***ing guns. If you take a look at this image of the same gun, add a little rotation, a mirror effect, you can start to see the elements that make up the BFG, even more so when you overlay the in-game sprite on top. When you see these images merge, you can start to imagine what id Software were working with as they designed their iconic weapon. While you may think it's odd that id Software found the inspiration for the BFG at the home of Geoffrey the Giraffe, it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about the popularity of toy guns in the late 80s and early 90s. Huge franchises like Rambo, the Terminator series, Predator, and even Aliens all had their own toy lines, and the industrial futuristic aesthetics of their weaponry provided vibrant inspirations for the Doom team. So for a games development studio looking to experiment with a new way of building assets using real-world objects, these toys ticked all of their boxes. They had the right look and feel, their simplistic designs and shapes made them easy to digitize, but they were also cheap, and finding them was as simple as driving to the mall. With the BFG 9000's humble design origins established, the very first appearance of the weapon would be in the original Doom's beta, known as the BFG 2704 in the Doom Bible, which is what the original game's design document was known as. The entry reads, BFG 2704, red, horrible hallway scouring weapon, damages user a bit, awful recoil, BFG stands for big f***ing gun, safest use, back to wall, distant target. The BFG fired a rapid stream of green and red plasma projectiles, which could bounce around the environment, continuing to do damage to the demons caught in their wake. However, with the number of sprites on screen, the weapon could cause the game to slow down, and according to John Romero, the red and green plasma sprites looked a bit too Christmassy, so the design was scrapped in favour of the big green energy blasts we now associate with the BFG 9000. When Doom was released in 1993, the earliest players could get their hands on the weapon was in the third mission of the third episode, Pandemonium. Being the last and most powerful firearm that Doomguy could bring to bear, it was understandably saved for the latter parts of the game where cyber demons and spider masterminds demand more ordnance to dispose of. In Doom 2, the weapon remained unchanged, instead simply continuing its legacy of reducing enemies to a crimson paste. And while the BFG received a facelift 3 years later in Doom 64, it still retained the core cyber demon melting power the weapon was known for. Well, you know what they say, if your glowing green super weapon ain't broke, don't fix it. It wasn't until Doom 3 when we really got a new version of the BFG to play with. For this version, there were some changes from previous titles, like having separate ammunition rather than being forced to share rounds with a plasma rifle, and having a charge option for a more powerful shot. In my opinion, the best thing it did for Doom 3 was bring the game back to its old school shooter roots. Doom 3 felt more like a horror game than a shooter. It was dark, it had jump scares, and forced you to ditch weapons in order to hold a flashlight, and the whole experience was much more slow and deliberate than what Doom was known for. That is, however, until you got to the final act of the game where both demons and ammunition was plentiful. Your arsenal was overflowing, and you could let loose with much more reckless abandon than you could in previous hours of playing. That was where the game felt like Dooms of old, and that was where the BFG was most at home. Big hordes of demons disappearing under a green glow at the pull of a trigger. The appearance of the BFG 9000 in Doom 2016, however, is still a moment that fills me with excitement and an urge to rip and tear even 4 years later. This is a game that encapsulates the energy of Doom and wears it proudly on its sleeve. As soon as you get through to the highly secured BFG, you're immediately thrown into a situation for you to make the most of its destructive power. A room full of enemies to jib as the hammering tones of Mick Gordon's BFG division begin to pound through your speakers. It is a moment that distills the BFG's legacy in a concentrated stream of intensity, motion, and simulated violence. It's for this reason that I would revert to Checkpoint and replay the moment again and again. It's satisfying and rewarding on so many levels, as a technically impressive set piece, a story beat, and as a moment to really engage that primal part of your brain that takes so much enjoyment in seeing stuff blow up. The first time I played through this section, I didn't realize that my heart rate was so high, or that I was holding in such a deep breath, until I heard the soothing tones of a computerized voice echo,
"Demonic presence eliminated. Lockdown disengaged."
While I think we all knew that the BFG 9000 would return in Doom Eternal, it wasn't until E3 2019 that we got our first glimpse at its famous green glow, as it span up against a cyber demon in an utter tease as the screen cuts to black before the shot is unleashed. In the lead up to Eternal was also the first time we got to see the real in-universe successor to the big f***ing gun in the form of the Phobos planetary cannon, the BFG 10,000. The legacy of the BFG, though, cannot be contained to the hellscapes of Doom. It became an icon when the FPS genre was still in its formative years, where dozens of Doom clones attempted to replicate the visceral experience through their own settings and weapons, and would continue to appear in other id Software games. 1997's Quake 2 featured a nod to the weapon with its own BFG 10K, which works in a similar way to the Doom versions. Quake 3 had a weapon with the same name, but instead shoots rapid-fire explosive projectiles similar to Doom's plasma rifle. It is present in the bizarre 2005 mobile game Doom RPG. In the Doom tabletop game, it is an action card that can ignore all defense and dodges. In the Doom comic, our Green Marine hero actually weeps when he acquires it, but not as hard as Doom fans wept during its appearance in the terrible Doom movie as the Bioforce Gun version 3.14. God, what a terrible name. Holy 2011's Rage introduced a weapon called the Authority Pulse Cannon, whose secondary fire used an alternate ammunition type called BFG rounds, and it even appeared in 2019's Rage 2, where you could find a familiar facsimile of the weapon, assuming you had the special edition of the game and had synced up your Bethesda account.
More rolls than Swiss cheese.
Now, one of the reasons this weapon is so legendary is down to the sheer number of times it's been referenced in movies, TV shows, video games, and even beyond. Honestly, the only way I'm going to get through them is if I rattle them off rapid fire mode. The 2004 PC RPG Sacred had an attack called BFG. Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal had a level called the Nefarious BFG. 2005 Criterion Software shooter Black references the M249 machine gun as the BFG. The globally popular MOBA League of Legends has an item named the BF Sword. Although not to be outdone, Blizzard's own MOBA, Heroes of the Storm, has a character named Sergeant Hammer, whose ultimate ability is the Blunt Force Gun. Indie roguelike Enter the Gungeon has a weapon known as the BSG, Big Shooty Gun, that acts like the BFG 9000. Half-Life Opposing Force has a weapon called the Displacer Cannon that seemingly works in the same way as the BFG. There was a Magic the Gathering expansion pack in 1998 that featured a BFM, or Big Furry Monster, a creature that was so big that it took up 2 cards. The largest can of the energy drink Monster that you used to be able to buy was called the BFC, and according to an interview with GQ, Elon Musk's internal names for the SpaceX's planned Mars rockets are known as the BFR and the BFS. Big f***ing rocket and big f***ing spaceship. It's amazing to think that the BFG 9000 has become such an iconic weapon within games considering where it came from. This simple toy gun went on to inspire one of the most revered virtual artifacts in gaming history. Now, did the original id team think that the design would become such an impactful source of inspiration and parody? I don't think their plans were that grandiose. In fact, I think the simplest explanation is the most likely, that they just wanted to make a big f***ing gun.
Demonic presence eliminated.
Thank you so much for watching our little love letter to the BFG 9000. If you enjoyed, make sure you like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments section down below, and if you're new here, make sure you go back and watch the other episodes of Loadout that are already on our YouTube channel. Smashing.
Happy with that? Everyone happy with that?